Hey, what is up, everybody? I'm here to bring back a series I haven't done on this channel in quite some time, just because I've been busy with other things. The last time I did this, I believe, was on October 2nd, 2015. I don't know the time exactly because I don't have the video in front of me to really go off of. The reason why I remember that, though, just going to be honest, is because I looked at it not that long ago, so it's something like I randomly had it popped into my head. I'm here to bring back the Read Aloud series. It's been a while since I've done this series. I've just been too busy with school and other things like that. So I want to finish this. I want to bring this back because I actually like doing the Read Aloud series. I also do it now on my own, the Talkinator channel, which you can check out by clicking right up here, and then clicking that down in the description box down below. But I'm going to be finishing a book that I started 2 years ago called let me just make sure I have the name of the book right. A look back at the rich history of the WWE Championship. I started this, a couple, about 2 years ago. But like I said, I just got busy with school and I went on vacations and other things. So I want to get back into reading this book. And I'm on chapter 19, so I want to finish it now. Hopefully, I remember when I did it at the time, it was kind of failing because I wasn't as good of a reader. But I'm definitely a better reader now than I was back then because I've read more stuff. And I've been doing my other Read Aloud series on the Owen the Talkinator channel, which, like I said, you can check out right up here. So, that's why I think, yeah, that's why I think this will go better the second time around. Now, I do want to make sure that I mention that I think because I've learned more wrestling knowledge from a couple of years ago. Some of the stuff in this book I think is kayfabe. Also, this book was written, I believe it was released in like 2010. Obviously the history is different now. What I'll probably do is when I finish reading this book, I'll make like a video talking about other history with the WWE Championship that goes with this book. Kind of like an epilogue type of thing. So that's going to be what happens. But let me just start off by reading this. I'm going to be reading chapter 19. And this chapter is called Montreal Screwjob. So obviously everybody, if you're a wrestling fan, knows what I'm about to be reading about. But if you don't, you obviously have been living under a rock. But you're about to find out. But this chapter starts on page 151 and it ends on page 162. So this is about 11 pages I'm about to read. So let's just get right into it. And if you want to, I just want to make sure I mention this. If you want to check out my Read Aloud series for this book for chapters 1 through 18, click on this playlist right up here. Now that I've addressed that, let's get right into it. Bret Hart was on top of the world following his SummerSlam victory over Undertaker in August 1997. Not only did he finally have the quality title match he desired for so long, but he also tied Hulk Hogan's then record of 5 WWE Championship reigns, coupled with the security of a newly signed 20-year WWE contract. Things couldn't have been going any better for the Hitman, or so he thought. About 6 weeks after SummerSlam, Hart was ordered to Vince McMahon's office for a meeting. According to Hart, McMahon claimed that WCW's dominance over WWE, back then it was called WWF, but I think I'm just gonna read it by the way this book tells me. But back then it was called WWF. But they changed it to WWE in 2002, was sending his company into financial peril. I think that's how you say that. As a result, he intended on breaching Hart's contract to $10.5 million over 20 years, and that was all in parentheses. Instead of paying him his full salary, McMahon informed his champion he would receive his money at the back end of his lengthy deal. The meeting ended with McMahon urging Hart to see if he could get WCW to offer him the same deal they offered him, the year before when he was a free agent. $9 million over 3 years. If Hulk could successfully ink a deal with WCW, WWE would no longer be responsible for the $10.5 million owed to the Hitman. McMahon gave Hulk until November 1st to negotiate a contract with WCW. Heeded his boss's advice, Hulk reached out to WCW to see if the same deal was on the table. They came back with $7.5 million over 3 years, almost as much as McMahon was giving him over 20 years. Despite the large amount of money, though, Hulk's home was in the WWE ring. I never had any intention of leaving, says Hulk. Naively enough, I thought whatever was happening with me and Vince would get sorted out. Hulk claims to have called McMahon on October 31st to discuss his WWE future and ultimately informed him that he would not be taking WCW's deal. They spoke only briefly before McMahon told the Hitman he would call him back later with a detailed outline of his future. According to Hulk, the call didn't come until minutes before the midnight deadline, and to make matters worse, the conversation turned somewhat sour when McMahon's outline was not to Hulk's liking. Before hanging up, McMahon told his champion to think with his head and take the security of the WCW deal. Moments later, Hulk signed his WCW contracts and faxed it back to Eric Bischoff. Just like that, his 14-year WWE career was over. With his champion's signature on the rival's contract, Vince McMahon had to do everything in his power to ensure another Alundra Blaze incident wasn't on the horizon. In December 1995, WWE Women's Champion Blaze abruptly left to sign with WCW. In her initial appearance on Monday Nitro, the buxom blonde held up the WWE Women's title she once proudly carried and proceeded to throw it into a garbage can. The sight of a WWE titleist disrespecting WWE on WCW television remains one of the most infamous moments in sports entertainment history, which is true. Since then, though, she's been inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame. She went in, I believe, in 2015, and she did bring that moment up. And she talked about how she didn't want to do it and stuff. It was actually pretty cool. In an attempt to avoid another embarrassing situation, McMahon wanted Hulk to lose the WWE Championship to Shawn Michaels at Survivor Series in Montreal, Canada. They would eliminate any chances of the Hitman showing up on Nitro with the WWE title. The last thing Hulk wanted to do, however, was lose the gold in his home country. Considering McMahon's powerful position, a fan could assume Vince would simply demand that Hulk surrender the gold to Michaels at Survivor Series. This was not the case, though. Hulk's contract stated that he had full creative control over the final 30 days of his term. And as luck would have it, the Hitman had no plans of walking out of Canada without his WWE Championship. And here's a picture of Bret Hart. You can see Bret Hart, Jim the Anvil Neidhart, and Owen Hart in the ring. It says Jim Hart and Owen Hart console Bret Hart, because you're gonna find out why they were consoling him. During this time period, McMahon held weekly conference calls with Triple H and Shawn Michaels. On the Wednesday before Survivor Series, he alerted both superstars to Hulk's unwillingness to surrender the gold. Being the true historians of the game that they were, both Triple H and HBK grew irate over the news. To them, doing what was asked of you on your way out the door of a promotion has always been a time-honored tradition. Because normally when you lose your last match in a territory back then, or in your company, you normally lose on your back, you put over another superstar, so that's, I think, what they're referencing there. To them, Okay, every competitor who has ever laced a pair of boots lived by this rule. To hear that Hart was refusing to honor McMahon's wishes offended Triple H and HBK. In his 2005 autobiography, Heartbreak and Triumph, Shawn Michaels recalls his exchange with McMahon during the conference call. And like I said, I'm about to lose $100 every time I mention Shawn Michaels' name. So just $100 is just going to go out the window every time. I'll do whatever you want. We'll just take it off him. I'll just swerve him or whatever I have to do. You tell me what needs to get done. You and this company have put up with so much for me. My loyalty is here with you. I'll do whatever you want. What are you talking about, Shawn? Whatever it takes. If we have to do a fast count or get him in a hold and tell someone to ring the bell, but I'll do whatever you want me to do. That's pretty serious. That has to be a last resort. I still have until Saturday to talk to Brett. They may have to get a real... That may have to be a real option. This cannot be discussed with anyone. Pat Patterson can't know. Nobody can know about this but the three of us right now. Saturday came and Hart still refused to give in to the demands. As a result, Vince McMahon and Shawn Michaels felt they had very little choice. Early on Sunday, the day of Survivor Series, HBK came up with the plan to get Hart in a sharpshooter. Once it was locked in, referee Earl Hebner, who would be tipped off prior to the start of the match, would immediately call for the bell. And just like that, the unsuspected Bret Hart would see his 5th title reign, as well as his WWE career, come to an embarrassing end. Michaels and Hart shared a private moment together prior to the start of the pay-per-view. This was wildly uncharacteristic considering the ill feelings both men developed for each other over the years. Perhaps Hart, realizing the end was near, was trying to extend an olive branch before departing for WCW. Either way, their exchange did not resonate well with HBK, who was forced to feign compassion, knowing that he was about to screw Hart out of his most prized possession. And here you can see, there's a picture. Shawn Michaels applies the sharpshooter to Bret Hart of the whole situation happening. I don't know if this is true, because like I said, this book is written by somebody else. Because I heard Shawn Michaels originally didn't want to do it. But I wouldn't really be shocked if this wasn't Shawn Michaels' idea. But I heard, it was all Vince's idea. But like I said, I'm just going to read this and then give you my... Because I've actually never really talked a lot about the Montreal Screwjob, because I never really had to before. So I'm just going to continue reading this. And give you my initial thoughts point by point about what I think about the Montreal Screwjob. So continuing, it was the most uncomfortable talk ever, remembered Michaels. He and I had a lot of conversations over the years, mending and breaking down, mending and breaking down. And on this day we had another one. I never felt lower. We shook hands and I knew full well what was going on. I look back at it now and I feel like a scumbag. But there was no turning back for Shawn Michaels. He had a job to do. Take the WWE Championship from Bret Hart. Everything went according to HBK's plan during the bout. Finally, during a late match offensive, Michaels put Hart in a sharpshooter. Well before he could truly lock in the move, the referee called for the bell. Vince McMahon, who had come to the win mid-match, simultaneously called for the bell as well. Michaels' music blared over the loudspeaker as the Canadian crowd looked on in disbelief. Their hero had just lost the WWE Championship despite never tapping out or screaming, "I quit." Sorry about that, but he knew exactly what was going on. Vince wanted to take 100% of the heat, says Michaels regarding his denying involvement. I told him no way, but he said it was his decision and he would take the heat. I understood his perspective, but in the end, I was the guy holding the gun. I was the guy who had to shoot Bret Hart. After the match, Michaels still charged in as if he had no clue, grabbing his title and darted toward the back, leaving Hart in the ring alone. Mystified by what had just transpired, the former champ did the first thing that came to mind: spit a gigantic wad of Feldum directly into McMahon's face. He then signaled the letters. That's my dog barking. Hello, stop it. Stop. Hey. This is sorry about that. You're just gonna have to deal with it. I think she sees like a little dog or something. Hello, come on. Don't do that. Let's see, let me just continue where I left off. He then signaled the letters WCW in the air with his pointed finger before finally leaving the ring and destroying any WWE property he could get his hands on. Nothing was safe from Hart's wrath. He trashed everything from television monitors to headsets. As he continued his rampage, the Canadian crowd grew more and more enraged by the betrayal. Before I go on to the next page, here's a picture of Bret Hart stares in disbelief as Vince McMahon. I'm just going to respond to this text. I'm so sorry. So this is a picture of Bret Hart stares in disbelief at Vince McMahon. Just the picture right here. So now I'm going to finish. It was a pretty vital moment, recalls Hart. I always thought that it wouldn't have taken much to start a riot in that building that night. I probably could have gotten that whole crowd to storm the back of the building and turn some cars over in the streets. It was a powder keg that night. But the hitman regained his composure and headed back toward the locker room. As he passed his puzzled family, he began to think that all his previous success had been for naught. Instead of remembering his 5 WWE Championship reigns, Bret Hart believed fans would now remember him for losing in Montreal. That was a bitter pill for me to swallow. It was a sad feeling for me to know that everything I had ever done meant so little to Vince. All my loyalty was for nothing. Once in the back, Hart took a quick shower in an attempt to cool his mind. It didn't help. When McMahon arrived in Hart's locker room, the two engaged in a verbal altercation. After a few minutes, Hart grew tired of the words coming from his former employer's mouth, so he punched him in the face. To this day, the incident remains one of the wrestling's most notorious moments, despite never being caught on camera. I think it was the perfect thing to do. It was fair for me. It was fair from my standpoint. I had been so missiled and maliciously wounded in the ring. I felt so betrayed, like I had let the whole country down. I don't think people sensed how important it was for me to win that match. I still think people underestimated how proud Canada was of me at the time. So I think that dust up with Vince was the perfect response. If I had to do it all over again, I don't think I would have done anything differently. It was pretty sweet decking Vince. McMahon on WWE 7 days after being punched. I was disappointed in Bret when he hit me. Very disappointed. I sustained a concussion as a result of it. With vision problems to this day. I'll get over it. I didn't think it was the right thing to do. Bret seems to be crowding about that I've read. He feels proud of striking me. It wasn't a question of a confrontation, because even at 52 years old, I dare say that perhaps things would have been a little different if there were a confrontation. I allowed Bret to strike me. I had hoped that he wouldn't. I had hoped that he could sit down and try to work things out as gentlemen. That's what I had really hoped for, but that's not what happened. Immediately following Survivor Series, angered Hart fans started to point their frustration toward McMahon, claiming that Vince screwed Bret. The WWE owner, however, saw things much differently. McMahon reflects on Survivor Series 7 days later. Some would say I screwed Bret Hart. Bret Hart would definitely tell you I screwed him. I look at it from a different standpoint. I look at it from the standpoint of the referee did not screw Bret. Bret Hart, Shawn Michaels certainly did not screw Bret Hart, nor did... No, wait, sorry, let me read that again. I look at it from a different standpoint of the referee did not screw Bret Hart. Shawn Michaels certainly did not screw Bret Hart, nor did Vince McMahon screw Bret Hart. I truly believe that Bret Hart screwed Bret Hart, and he cannot look in the mirror and know that. I would certainly take responsibility for any decision I ever made. I never had a problem with doing that. Not that all of my decisions are accurate. They're not. Because when I make a bad decision, I'm not above saying I'm sorry and trying to do the best thing about it then that I can. Hopefully the batting's average is pretty good. I make more good decisions than I do bad decisions. As far as screwing Bret Hart is concerned, there is a time-honored tradition in the wrestling business that when someone is leaving, they show the right amount of respect to the WWE superstars in this case, who help make you that superstar. You show the proper respect to the organization that helped you become who you are today. It's a time-honored tradition, and Bret Hart didn't want to honor that tradition. And that's something I would have never expected from Bret, because he is known somewhat as a traditionalist in this business. It would have never crossed my mind that Bret would not want to show the right amount of respect to the superstars who helped make him and the organization who helped make him what he is today. Nonetheless, that was Bret's decision. Bret screwed Bret. Who actually screwed whom is a debate that still rages today. Michaels also found his post-Survivor Series life to be difficult. Many of his colleagues disagreed with his actions in Montreal, leaving HBK to fear for his safety. So he and Triple H came up with hand signals to protect themselves. If something broke down, we were going to jump on whoever we had to jump on, if we could take them. If not, we were going to get the heck out of there. It was a very tense and uncomfortable time. Life got a hell of a lot harder after Survivor Series. While Michaels feared for his life in WWE, Hart took his game to the rival organization. Following the events of Survivor Series, many believed WCW was getting sports entertainment's hottest commodity. Unfortunately for them, though, they failed to find a way to capitalize on Hart's popularity. Hart on his time with WCW. I never thought WCW and Eric Bischoff had any brains. Before I went there, I knew they were a bunch of mindless idiots who didn't know a lot about wrestling, and that I would probably sit on the bench, spin my tires, and become disgruntled. I expected all of those things, and they all happened. I think Vince was the one who told me that WCW wouldn't know what to do with a Bret Hart. I remember thinking he was so right. I didn't want to leave WWE. Not for the money, not for anything. I just wanted to stay. I always thought I would go back and work for Vince after the 3 years with WCW. I wanted so much to make a difference in that company. I was ready to give everything I had, and for Bischoff to say otherwise is clueless. I only did what they told me to do. There was never a case of me not wanting to do something. If anything, I tried to take their lousy ideas and make them sellable. The fact that I didn't go anywhere has to go back to them, not me. Vince Russo was another clueless non-wrestler who never worked a match in his life. He didn't know anything about wrestling, psychology, or how to build a match. He had no idea, neither did Bischoff. The average wrestling fan has more scope and psychology than Russo and Bischoff ever had. They were just wrestling fans. Despite the disdain for Bischoff and Russo, the Hitman went on to become a two-time WCW champion. to halt those championship reigns couldn't compare to wearing the WWE Championship. Most of the time, I just threw the WCW belt in my bag and never thought twice about it. Those WCW title wins never really mattered to me. I had more important matches working for my dad. Even when I won it in Toronto, there was some stupid run-in with Dean Malenko and interference with about a half of a dozen guys. It was such a convoluted ending that when I held the belt up, I almost rolled my eyes. More than a decade after Survivor Series, Hart and Michael still think back to the infamous night. Ironically, Hart is able to find some good from what happened, while HBK wishes it never happened. So this is Hart's take on it. It's the most real thing that ever happened in wrestling, and it stands out as a pivotal moment. I think wrestlers hold me in the highest regard now as they look back and recognize that I took my responsibility as a wrestler so seriously that I had to take the position that I did. I think they respect that. I think Shawn respects that. I don't know a lot of wrestlers that would have taken the position that I did, let alone follow up afterward and knock out Vince. But it defined me as a character. It defined me as a Canadian. Years later, I got voted the 39th greatest Canadian of all time. The people who voted said they did so because I stood up to America and Vince McMahon. I'm still pretty proud of myself for that day. And then this is Michael's take on it. I regret everything with Brett. I wish I had something better to say than I was angry and out of control, but I don't. I was tough to deal with back then. I felt like nobody wanted me to succeed and everybody wanted me to fail, but I was not going to let anybody take me down. Brett had a great career, and so much of it now is focused on Montreal, and that sucks. He deserves better than that. He was great at what he did, but I guess you could say that's particularly his fault because he focused so much on it. It was a bad time and a bad situation. And that's the end of the chapter. So, obviously, overall, that's the Montreal Screwjob in a nutshell. Pretty much the entire thing explained. Now I'm going to give you my take on it. So, obviously, we have, I feel like it's a lot of people are at fault for it. It's obviously, I think, Vince McMahon's fault. Vince McMahon knew Bret Hart was signing with WCW to begin with. They knew they weren't going to be able to afford Bret Hart. So, and I feel like they had known for a while Bret Hart was going to be leaving for WCW. It says in that book it was like 6 weeks after SummerSlam. Around after SummerSlam time. But let me say this. If you knew Bret Hart was leaving for WCW, why would you give him your WWF championship? I'm just going to call it WWF what it was. Why would you give him your top belt if you knew he was leaving for WCW? That, you kind of put yourself in this situation by giving the guy that's leaving the top belt, the guy that has creative control over when he can lose and stuff. Like, that's pretty much you're asking for a shitty situation, pretty much. That you gave the guy that left, that's going to be leaving for WCW. You guys knew you were going to have to come to this point, but yet you gave him your top WWE title and let him carry it to a Survivor Series. That's kind of a problem right there. You should have had him drop the title. Shawn Michaels, obviously, as he mentioned, was a big asshole to deal with at the time. So obviously, there was heat between Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels, so obviously that made it even more difficult. I think Bret Hart was being a little bit of an egomaniac by choosing not to lose in his home country. I do agree with them on the fact that when you lose, you go out on your back. So, I think Bret Hart was being very stubborn that night. He wasn't easy to deal with. So that's my take on it there. Shawn Michaels, like I said, was an asshole at the time, so there's a lot of factors at play with this whole thing. But let's it doesn't say in there what happened, obviously. Obviously, WCW really fucked up with Bret Hart. He didn't feel like a top guy. They pretty much just, you know, they used him like shit. You know, they had him join NWO, then he wasn't in NWO. They had him hold the U.S. title 5 times. He was a mid-card wrestler there. So they really fucked up with Bret Hart in his time in WCW. They didn't really treat him like a top star. They literally had him come out of the hottest angle in wrestling just for him to, yeah, get used like shit. Then obviously he had the concussions, and yeah, it's just, fortunately Bret Hart, his time in WCW took the passion out of wrestling. Obviously then Owen Hart died, which was even more brutal. But eventually Bret Hart and Vince McMahon did work shit out. Bret Hart went into the Hall of Fame in 2006. Him and Shawn Michaels, though, were still fighting. Bret Hart had finally made his first appearance in WWE in 2010 in January. You know, he finally worked shit out with Shawn Michaels. I heard that segment was completely real, like that was like a legitimate segment, which I thought was great. And then, you know, Bret Hart and Vince McMahon went on to have a big feud, and went on to have a pretty terrible match at WrestleMania. But Bret Hart finally found some closure about what happened, so that was, I thought, pretty good. Yeah, this is probably the most famous moment. You know, this led to, before this moment, it doesn't say this, I'm surprised it wouldn't. Maybe it's going to be in the next chapter. Vince McMahon, we didn't really know owned WWF at the time. They would always put in people like President Jack Tunney or Gorilla Monsoon to pretend to be the owner of the WWF. But really, Vince McMahon owned it, but they didn't want anybody to know that. So, yeah, Vince McMahon, this finally let it to be known. This created the big heel Vince that we saw in the Attitude Era, probably one of the greatest heels in the wrestling business. Shawn Michaels became a big heel out of this. Obviously, in the next chapter, we'll mention what happened to Shawn Michaels, so I'm not really going to talk too much about it. But it did create the big heel Vince that we knew. Went on to know, love, and hate, whatever one. So overall, if the Montreal Screwjob, it also helped boost to the Attitude Era, which it will be in the next chapter. It also helped that. So this Montreal Screwjob, even though it kind of sucked for Bret Hart and stuff, and it was a shitty situation, it really helped boost the WWF. It really kind of got the WWF talking. You know, people started talking about the WWF again because it was getting beaten in the ratings by WCW, and this really kind of helped boost the WWF and launch it into the Attitude Era. So the Montreal Screwjob, you could say, was a win-lose situation. A win for the WWF and Vince McMahon, a lose for Bret Hart and maybe Shawn Michaels. So overall, the Montreal Screwjob did do some good, and that's just my take on the Montreal Screwjob. I probably will end up talking about it again at some point, but that's kind of my thoughts about it right now. But that's pretty much it, guys. Thank you guys for checking out this video. Please make sure to subscribe to my Sea of Brothers channel, because I just did my video for What's Better Raw with SmackDown. And that's pretty much it, guys. Talk to you later.